The sun rose over Maplewood Estates with the kind of soft insistence that promised another day of predictable tranquility. It was a neighborhood choreographed into neat little boxes, each house a carefully curated stage where life played out in polite whispers, and well-mowed lawns. In this pristine ensemble, Karen orchestrated her own overture, her music a sharp, ascending note that cut through the hum of suburbia. She was the self-appointed conductor of the Homeowners Association, wielding rules like a baton, each flick of her wrist a summons to conform. My own corner of this world was defined by a modest welcome mat. Nothing remarkable, just a simple greeting. Welcome, stitched in fading capital letters against a field of beige. It had seen better days, but it held its ground straight and true. It was an invitation and a promise wrapped into one, a humble token of my desire to belong without standing out. Karen saw that mat, though, and frowned. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned it like an auditor examining a ledger. It was a small thing, a trinket really, but in her hands, it became a transgression. The letter arrived soon after, printed in a precise font that whispered of authority and the smallest of grudges. She had noted the mat's threadbare state, its fraying edges, and suggested, ever so delicately, that it detracted from the neighborhood's aesthetic. There was no reprimand, just a suggestion, gentle yet firm, wrapped in the guise of neighborly concern. I read the note once, twice, letting each word soak in like ink into parchment. Then I placed it neatly in the drawer, reserved for things that mattered little. It was not anger that filled me, but something quieter, an understanding of the roles we played on this carefully constructed stage. She was the enforcer of norms, and I had my own part to play. The mat remained for a time, a silent sentinel to my defiance cloaked in passivity. Days passed, and Karen's shadow stretched long across my front step as she patrolled with the air of a general inspecting the troops. There were other letters, other grievances, each a note in her symphony of control. She critiqued the height of my hedges, the placement of my recycling bin. Each missive was a nudge, a reminder of the boundaries she policed with such fervor. I listened, absorbing her notes, allowing each to weave into the fabric of my routine. I tended to the hedges, adjusted the bin, but the mat remained, a testament to my quiet rebellion. In the solitude of my thoughts, I considered Karen, her need to mold the world, to shape it to her vision. It spoke of a struggle, perhaps, to hold chaos at bay, to anchor herself in a sea of unpredictability. Or maybe it was simpler, a need to be seen, to matter in a place that so easily blurred individual lines. Eventually, I replaced the mat. I chose one that spoke directly to her, an echo of her presence in my life. "Hi, Karen," it read in bold, friendly letters, a greeting and a declaration all at once. It was a small thing, yet significant, a gesture that roamed the fine line between peace and provocation. The next morning, the sun rose again, casting its gentle light over Maplewood Estates. And there, at the threshold of my door, lay my new mat, proud and unyielding, its message clear and unafraid. Karen saw it, of course. I imagined her pause, a moment stretched into infinity as she absorbed the retort stitched into its fibers. The stage was set, the act reshaped, yet the day continued its unfaltering march. In the quiet that followed, I felt a shift, the subtle realignment of a world adapting to its new script, and in that moment I knew this was only the beginning. The sun rose with a subdued brilliance, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and perfectly symmetrical flower beds. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your cheeks just enough to remind you that you're alive. And there it was, the welcome mat, a simple, cheeky thing with its bold letters. "Hi, Karen." I felt a strange mix of amusement and anticipation, a quiet rebellion, like wearing mismatched socks to a formal event. But Karen, the self-appointed czar of our homeowners association, saw it differently. To her, it was an affront, a direct challenge to her ironclad rulebook, which seemed to grow thicker with every passing week. Karen escalated. Her strategy was subtle but relentless, like a slow drip of water carving a canyon. The first notice arrived that afternoon. An envelope slipped under my door, stamped with the HOA's emblem. Inside, a citation for an improper display, and a warning about non-compliant exterior decorations. There were whispers of fines, talk of board meetings. I chuckled softly to myself, imagining Karen hunched over her keyboard, typing furiously, eyes narrowed with the fervor of a zealot. She probably didn't realize how human it made her seem, how much her obsession revealed. It spoke volumes of her need for control, her fear of disorder, and maybe, just maybe, a kernel of insecurity nestled deep within. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Karen had a way of spreading her gospel with the skill of a seasoned politician. Neighbors eyed me with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if I were a strange creature suddenly unearthed in their well-tended ecosystem. I saw them whispering over hedges, their voices carrying on the wind like secret songs. Karen's rules multiplied like rabbits, absurdities born from an overactive imagination, or perhaps a desire to break my spirit. My hedges were too high, my porch light too bright, my mailbox the wrong shade of white. Each new citation was a testament to creativity, a nod to a relentless pursuit of perfection. Or was it revenge? I watched her, occasionally, from my window. She moved with purpose, clipboard in hand, patrolling the streets with the authority of a monarch surveying her kingdom. Her lips pursed, eyes scanning for any sign of rebellion. There was something almost admirable about her determination. Almost. Inside, I simmered with a quiet defiance. My mat remained, a small, steadfast rebellion against the absurdity of it all. It was both a message and a mirror, reflecting Karen's absurdities back at her. A reminder that life was too short to be lived in monochrome, too unpredictable to be constrained by the arbitrary lines she drew. And so, we continued our dance, her with her rules, me with my mat. An unspoken battle that played out in silent gestures. A wink, a nod, the rustle of paper slipping under a door. It was a strange kind of war, one fought not with weapons but with words, with glances, with a sense of humor that bordered on the irreverent. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what drove Karen, what made her tick. Did she really believe in the sanctity of her rules, or was she just afraid of what lay beyond them? I'd never know, probably. But it didn't matter. Life moved on, as it always does, carrying us forward on its unpredictable tide. I smiled, stepping over my mat as I left for the day. Whatever her reasons, Karen had made one thing abundantly clear. In a world of welcome mats, mine was the most interesting. The morning began with a hush, the kind that hangs heavy in the air before a storm. I stood at the window, watching the slow parade of neighbors trickle past. Their eyes caught on the new welcome mat. A smirk of defiance nestled at my doorstep. "Hi, Karen." It read in bold, declarative script. It was audacious, a little cheeky, a quiet rebellion etched into the fabric of my life. I sipped my coffee, the warmth spreading through me like a secret. The first to notice was Mrs. Thompson from 2 doors down. She paused, her gaze lingering longer than casual curiosity allowed. I watched her lips curl upward, a suppressed grin that flickered like a forbidden flame. She gave a slight nod to herself and continued on, a conspiratorial spring in her step. Others followed, some feigning indifference, others exchanging glances that spoke louder than words. It was as if the mat had whispered to them, weaving them into the tapestry of my small act of defiance. Karen, of course, was oblivious to the gathering storm. She had a way of gliding through life, wrapped in her own narrative. Her world was a well-oiled machine of rules and regulations, and she was its self-appointed guardian. But here, at my doorstep, reality had thrown a wrench in her gears. The tension in the neighborhood became palpable, a living thing that thrummed in the spaces between us. Mornings buzzed with an electric anticipation as people walked their dogs, collected their mail, and lingered just a moment longer than necessary. My intentions had been simple: a message, not shouted, but spoken softly enough to be felt beneath the skin. Yet, like ripples in a pond, it spread wider and deeper than I had imagined. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the evening, a gathering I typically avoided but now found myself eager to attend. The air was thick with expectation as I arrived, the usual hum of pleasantries tinged with something sharper. Karen, seated at the head of the table, was the picture of composure. Her eyes flicked across the room, cataloging attendees with the precision of a librarian sorting books. She hadn't acknowledged my mat, at least not publicly, but I knew she knew. The meeting unfolded in a predictable rhythm, a dance of agendas and updates. I watched Karen closely, waiting for the moment when my mat might make its debut in the litany of complaints and concerns. It happened with the kind of casual inevitability that defines fate. A neighbor, emboldened by the collective undercurrent, mentioned it offhandedly, a lone sentence tossed into the ring like a gauntlet. Karen's eyes narrowed, a calculated shift of the tide. "Some decorum must be maintained," she stated, her voice a blade cloaked in velvet. Silence followed, a beat too long, the air heavy with significance. It was a standoff dressed in civility, a battle fought not with swords but with the subtle art of suggestion. I met her gaze, holding it for a moment longer than necessary. It was a silent acknowledgement of the game we played, a tacit understanding of the boundaries we danced upon. And then, as if nothing had transpired, the meeting continued. The mat remained, a monument to the unspoken tensions that wove through our lives. As I left, the evening sky bathed the world in shades of orange and purple, a final bow to the day's performance. The neighborhood was quiet, the calm after the storm before the next one inevitably brewed. I stepped onto my porch, the words, "Hi, Karen," beneath my feet, a constant reminder of the power of small rebellions. In that moment, I understood. Sometimes the loudest voices are those that speak in whispers. The sun hung low, casting elongated shadows across the neighborhood. The air was thick with anticipation, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of our tidy little community. Karen had been the self-appointed arbiter of our happiness for too long, her voice a constant drone of discontent. But today, the turning wheel of neighborhood justice creaked to a halt. It was time for a reckoning. I stood at my window, the scene unfolding like a play on a small-town stage. My new welcome mat sat boldly at the center, its message both a challenge and a reminder that I had had enough. "Hi, Karen," it proclaimed in unapologetic letters. It was a flag, flapping defiantly against the winds of pettiness. The past week had been a symphony of whispers, neighbors leaning in close, eyes darting to ensure Karen wasn't within earshot. Her complaints had grown shrill, her grip on our lives tightening like a noose. But beneath her tyranny, unity had quietly blossomed. We were ready. As if on cue, Karen emerged. Her gait creaked ominously, as if groaning under the weight of her dissatisfaction. She paused, eyes narrowing as they fell upon my mat, the realization slithering across her face like a dark cloud. Her mouth twitched, a perfect pantomime of disapproval. Part of me expected her to explode, to unleash a torrent of grievances. Instead, she stood there, a statue of impotent rage. Her fingers curled into fists, but her voice failed her. The neighborhood watched, a silent jury, each of us weighing her response against the collective burden of her past offenses. I felt the corners of my lips curve upward. Not a smile, not quite. More a recognition that this was the moment, our moment. The scales had tipped. Karen had always been the storm, but storms lose their fury eventually. They exhaust themselves, leaving only fresh air and the promise of calm. The silence stretched, taut as a drawn bow. Finally, Karen turned on her heel, retreating to the sanctuary of her meticulously pruned hedges. She had been sidelined, not by force, but by her own isolation. The community had turned a page, and she was no longer part of the story. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the neighborhood exhaled. Lights flickered on, illuminating paths of reconciliation and newfound camaraderie. We were free, the specter of Karen's disapproval lifting like morning fog. In the days that followed, life resumed its gentle rhythm. Neighbors greeted each other with newfound warmth, the air buzzing with shared experiences and laughter. My mat remained, a symbol of resilience and the quiet power of community standing united. Karen still resided in her corner house, but her presence was diminished, like a shadow at midday. Her complaints had become whispers, bouncing off the walls of her own making. I often found myself reflecting, thinking of the irony that the simplest acts can break chains. A mere mat, a few words, and a collective nod of recognition were all it took to reclaim our world from her tyranny. Victory didn't roar, it whispered, and all it needed was for us to listen.